Ex-business partner tried to blackmail me with fake evidence of tax fraud. The FBI investigation revealed who the real criminal was. 3 months ago, I thought my life was falling apart when my former business partner showed up at my door with a manila envelope full of what he claimed was evidence of tax fraud. I had just finished making breakfast for my kids when the doorbell rang, and there he was, smiling that same fake smile he used to flash during our partnership meetings. The envelope contained photocopied documents that looked like they came from our old company's financial records, but something felt off about the whole situation from the moment he started talking. My ex-partner had always been the type of person who seemed charming on the surface, but had this underlying current of manipulation that I never fully recognized until after we dissolved our business relationship 2 years ago. He stood there on my front porch, explaining how he had discovered these documents while cleaning out his old office files, and how terrible it would be if the IRS got wind of what appeared to be significant underreporting of income during our partnership years. The way he kept emphasizing certain words and pausing dramatically made it clear this wasn't just a friendly heads-up visit. The documents he showed me contained what looked like altered invoices and receipts that suggested we had been hiding cash payments from clients and failing to report them properly on our tax returns. I recognized some of the legitimate transactions, but noticed that many of the dollar amounts had been changed, and there were entries for clients I had never heard of during our time working together. My stomach dropped as I realized what he was attempting to do, but I tried to keep my composure and not let him see how rattled I felt by his accusations. He then made his intentions crystal clear by explaining how he had been going through some financial difficulties lately, and how a loan of $50,000 would help him get back on his feet, while also ensuring these problematic documents never found their way to any government agencies. The casual way he mentioned this amount while leaning against my doorframe made my blood boil, but I knew I needed to be smart about how I handled this situation rather than letting my anger take control of my response. I told him I needed time to review the documents and think about what he was suggesting, which seemed to satisfy him for the moment. He gave me 2 weeks to come up with the money and left his contact information before walking back to his car with that same smug expression he always wore when he thought he had gotten the upper hand in a negotiation. After he drove away, I sat in my kitchen staring at those papers for hours, trying to figure out how someone I had once trusted could stoop to such a low level. The first thing I did was call my accountant to review our old tax returns and verify that everything had been filed correctly during the years in question. She confirmed that all our filings were legitimate and that the amounts shown in my ex-partner's documents didn't match our actual reported income, which gave me some relief, but also raised more questions about where these altered documents had come from. I also reached out to my lawyer to get advice on how to handle what was clearly an attempted extortion scheme. My lawyer advised me to document everything and consider contacting law enforcement, but I was hesitant because I worried about the potential damage to my reputation even if the allegations were completely false. The stress of the situation was affecting my sleep and my ability to focus on my current work, and I found myself constantly checking my phone, expecting another threatening message or surprise visit from my former partner. During this time, I started doing some research into my ex-partner's recent activities and discovered that he had been involved in several failed business ventures since we parted ways. Through mutual contacts in our industry, I learned that he had been asking others for loans and had developed a reputation for being unreliable when it came to paying back money he borrowed. This information helped me understand his desperation, but it also made me realize that giving in to his demands would likely only be the beginning of his attempts to exploit me. The turning point came when I decided to take my lawyer's advice and contact the FBI's white-collar crime division to report the extortion attempt. I was nervous about involving federal law enforcement, but the agent I spoke with was professional and reassuring about the process. She explained that extortion cases like mine were more common than I might think, and that they had experience dealing with situations involving falsified financial documents. The FBI agent asked me to provide copies of all the documents my ex-partner had shown me along with our legitimate tax returns and business records from the relevant time period. She also requested that I maintain normal communication with my ex-partner while they investigated, which meant I had to pretend I was still considering his demands while actually working with federal agents to build a case against him. This period of pretending to negotiate with my ex-partner while secretly recording our conversations and documenting his threats was one of the most stressful experiences of my life. Every phone call felt like walking on a tightrope, because I had to sound convincing while not actually agreeing to pay him anything. The FBI agents coached me on what to say and how to keep him talking long enough to gather evidence of his criminal behavior. 3 weeks into the investigation, the FBI agent called me with some surprising news that completely changed my understanding of the situation. Their forensic analysis of the documents had revealed that not only were they forged, but they had been created using software and techniques that suggested someone with advanced knowledge of document manipulation. More importantly, they had traced the digital fingerprints of the altered documents back to a computer that belonged to someone else entirely. It turned out that my ex-partner had been working with a third party who specialized in creating fraudulent financial documents for various scams and illegal schemes. This person had been operating under the radar for years, helping people fabricate evidence for insurance fraud, tax evasion, and extortion cases like mine. The FBI had been trying to track down this document forger for months, and my case had provided them with the breakthrough they needed. The real shock came when the FBI revealed that my ex-partner had actually been a victim of this document forger as well, at least initially. The forger had approached him months earlier with a proposition to create fake evidence of tax fraud that could be used to extort money from me, promising to split the proceeds from any successful blackmail attempt. My ex-partner had agreed to the scheme, but what he didn't know was that the forger had been recording all their conversations and planning to use him as a fall guy if the operation got discovered. When the FBI arrested both my ex-partner and the document forger, they found evidence of an extensive criminal enterprise that had been targeting business owners across multiple states. The forger had been creating fake financial documents, tax records, and legal papers for dozens of different scams, generating hundreds of thousands of dollars in illegal profits over several years. My case had been just one small part of a much larger operation that involved identity theft, wire fraud, and racketeering. The document forger had specifically targeted my ex-partner because he knew about our dissolved business relationship and thought he would be the perfect person to approach me with fraudulent evidence. He had researched our company's history and created documents that would look convincing enough to someone who wasn't familiar with our actual financial records. The forger had been counting on my ex-partner's desperation and lack of technical knowledge to make him a willing participant in the scheme. During the investigation, I learned that several other former business partners and associates had been approached by the same document forger, with similar schemes targeting their ex-colleagues. Some of them had fallen for the scam and paid money to avoid having fake evidence turned over to authorities, while others had recognized the fraud and reported it to law enforcement. The FBI was able to help recover some of the money that had been extorted from previous victims. The most surprising revelation came when the FBI showed me recordings of conversations between my ex-partner and the document forger that revealed my ex-partner had actually been having second thoughts about the whole scheme. He had been planning to back out of the extortion attempt and warn me about the forger's activities, but the forger had threatened to frame him for the entire operation if he didn't follow through with approaching me for money. This information completely changed my perspective on my ex-partner's motivations and made me realize that the situation had been more complex than I had initially understood. While he had still made the choice to participate in an illegal scheme and threaten me with false evidence, he had also been manipulated and coerced by someone who was much more experienced in criminal activities. The FBI agent explained that this was a common pattern in white-collar crime cases, where master criminals recruit others to carry out their schemes. The legal proceedings that followed were lengthy and complicated, involving multiple defendants and charges ranging from extortion to wire fraud to racketeering. I had to testify before a grand jury and provide detailed information about my business relationship with my ex-partner and the circumstances surrounding his extortion attempt. The process was emotionally draining, but I felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that my decision to report the crime had helped expose a larger criminal operation. My ex-partner ultimately pleaded guilty to attempted extortion and received a sentence of 2 years in federal prison, along with an order to pay restitution to the victims of the broader scheme. The document forger was sentenced to 8 years in prison and ordered to pay back hundreds of thousands of dollars in restitution to the numerous victims of his various fraud schemes. The FBI agent told me that my cooperation had been crucial in building the case against both defendants. The experience taught me valuable lessons about trust, manipulation, and the importance of taking legal action when someone tries to exploit you through illegal means. I realized that my initial instinct to try to handle the situation quietly and avoid involving law enforcement could have allowed the criminal enterprise to continue operating and victimizing other people. By reporting the extortion attempt, I had not only protected myself but also helped bring justice to many other victims. In the months following the resolution of the case, I received letters from several other business owners who had been approached by the same document forger thanking me for my role in exposing the scheme. Some of them had lost significant amounts of money to the scam, while others had been living in fear of having false evidence reported to authorities. Knowing that my actions had helped these people find closure and recover their losses made the difficult experience feel worthwhile. The financial impact of the case was minimal for me since I never actually paid any money to my ex-partner, but the emotional toll of dealing with the extortion attempt and the subsequent investigation was significant. I had to explain the situation to my family and closest friends, which was embarrassing and stressful even though I had done nothing wrong. The uncertainty of not knowing how the case would be resolved created anxiety that affected my work and personal relationships for several months. Looking back on the experience now, I'm grateful that I made the decision to involve law enforcement rather than trying to handle the situation on my own or giving in to my ex-partner's demands. The FBI agents were professional and supportive throughout the process, and they helped me understand that being the victim of an attempted crime was nothing to be ashamed of. They also provided resources and guidance that helped me protect myself from similar schemes in the future. The case also helped me develop a better understanding of how white-collar criminals operate and the sophisticated methods they use to create convincing fraudulent documents. I learned that document forgery has become increasingly sophisticated with advances in technology, making it harder for ordinary people to distinguish between legitimate and fake paperwork. This knowledge has made me more cautious about financial documents and more likely to verify information through multiple sources. One unexpected positive outcome of the whole experience was that it helped me reconnect with several former colleagues and business associates who reached out to offer support when they heard about what had happened. Some of these people had their own stories about being approached by suspicious individuals, offering deals that seemed too good to be true or threatening them with false evidence. These conversations helped me realize that attempted fraud and extortion are more common than most people realize. The resolution of the case also provided me with a sense of closure regarding my relationship with my ex-partner and the circumstances that led to the end of our business partnership. While I don't condone his actions or the choices he made, I gained a better understanding of the financial pressures and personal circumstances that may have made him vulnerable to manipulation by the document forger. This perspective has helped me move forward without carrying anger or resentment about the situation. Today, I'm more aware of the signs of potential scams and fraud attempts, and I'm quick to verify information and seek professional advice when something seems suspicious. I've also become an advocate for reporting financial crimes to law enforcement, encouraging others to speak up when they become victims of attempted fraud or extortion. The experience taught me that staying silent about criminal behavior only enables criminals to continue harming others. The FBI agents who worked on my case told me that my willingness to cooperate and provide detailed information had been crucial to the success of their investigation. They explained that many victims of white-collar crime are reluctant to come forward because they're embarrassed or afraid of retaliation, which allows criminal enterprises to continue operating. By reporting the extortion attempt and working with law enforcement, I had helped break up a significant criminal operation that had been causing harm to people across multiple states. The entire experience reinforced my belief in the importance of maintaining ethical standards in business and personal relationships, even when facing financial or personal pressures. While I can understand how desperation might lead someone to make poor choices, I believe that there are always legal and ethical alternatives to criminal behavior. The consequences of my ex-partner's decision to participate in the extortion scheme were severe and long-lasting, affecting not only his freedom but also his reputation and future prospects. As the investigation deepened, I discovered that the document forger had been operating his criminal enterprise for nearly a decade, using multiple aliases and shell companies to hide his activities. The FBI showed me evidence of at least 50 different victims who had been targeted with various schemes, ranging from simple extortion attempts like mine to complex insurance fraud cases involving millions of dollars. The scope of the operation was staggering and made me realize how fortunate I was to have reported the crime early in the process. The forger had developed a sophisticated network of contacts who helped him identify potential victims and recruit people like my ex-partner to carry out his schemes. He had infiltrated online business communities and professional networking groups to gather information about failed partnerships and business disputes that could be exploited for criminal purposes. The FBI discovered that he had been monitoring social media accounts and public records to identify people who might be vulnerable to his manipulation tactics. One of the most disturbing aspects of the case was learning about the psychological manipulation techniques the forger used to control his accomplices. He had studied their financial situations, personal relationships, and emotional vulnerabilities to determine the best ways to coerce them into participating in his schemes. My ex-partner had been going through a difficult divorce at the time he was approached, and the forger had exploited his desperation and emotional instability to convince him to participate in the extortion attempt. The investigation revealed that the forger had been using advanced computer software to create documents that were nearly indistinguishable from legitimate financial records. He had invested thousands of dollars in professional-grade equipment and software that allowed him to replicate watermarks, official seals, and other security features commonly found on authentic documents. The FBI's forensic analysis required specialized expertise and equipment to detect the subtle signs that the documents had been altered. During the trial proceedings, I learned that several other victims had initially fallen for the forger's schemes and paid money to avoid having false evidence reported to authorities. One small business owner had paid $15,000 to prevent fake tax documents from being sent to the IRS, while another had given up $25,000 to avoid having forged contracts submitted in a civil lawsuit. These victims had been too embarrassed or afraid to report the crimes, allowing the forger to continue operating with impunity. The psychological impact of being targeted by this criminal enterprise extended far beyond the immediate threat of extortion. I found myself questioning my judgment and wondering if I had somehow contributed to the situation by not recognizing the warning signs about my ex-partner's character flaws. The stress of the investigation and legal proceedings affected my sleep patterns, appetite, and ability to concentrate on my work for several months after the initial incident. My family members were also affected by the situation, particularly my children who had to deal with the stress of seeing their father going through such a difficult experience. I had to explain the situation to them in age-appropriate terms while also reassuring them that we were safe and that the authorities were handling the matter. The uncertainty of not knowing how long the investigation would take or what the ultimate outcome would be created anxiety for everyone in our household. The support I received from my friends and colleagues during this difficult time was both surprising and heartwarming. People who I hadn't spoken to in years reached out to offer emotional support and share their own experiences with similar situations. Several other business owners told me about times when they had been approached by suspicious individuals, offering questionable deals or making veiled threats about supposed financial irregularities. The FBI investigation also uncovered evidence that the document forger had been planning to expand his operations into other types of financial crimes, including identity theft and credit card fraud. He had been developing new techniques for creating fake identification documents and had established relationships with criminals in other states who could help him launder money and hide his illegal proceeds. My case had interrupted these plans and potentially prevented many other people from becoming victims. The legal complexity of the case was overwhelming at times, with multiple jurisdictions involved and various federal agencies coordinating their efforts. I had to work with prosecutors from different districts and provide testimony for several different aspects of the investigation. The FBI agents kept me informed about the progress of the case, but there were long periods of waiting and uncertainty while they gathered evidence and built their case against the defendants. One of the most frustrating aspects of the entire experience was dealing with the administrative burden of proving my innocence regarding the fake tax fraud allegations. Even though the FBI had conclusively determined that the documents were forged, I still had to work with my accountant and lawyer to document every aspect of our legitimate business transactions from the relevant time period. This process was time-consuming and expensive, adding to the overall cost of being victimized by this criminal scheme. The trial proceedings revealed additional details about the forger's criminal history that were both shocking and disturbing. He had been arrested several times over the years for various fraud-related crimes, but had managed to avoid serious prison time by cooperating with authorities and providing information about other criminals. This pattern of behavior had allowed him to continue operating his criminal enterprise while maintaining the appearance of being a reformed individual. The forger's methods for recruiting accomplices were particularly sophisticated and showed a deep understanding of human psychology and motivation. He would spend weeks or months researching potential targets, learning about their financial situations, personal relationships, and emotional vulnerabilities. He would then approach them with carefully crafted stories and proposals that seemed to offer easy solutions to their problems while minimizing the apparent risks of participation. My ex-partner's testimony during the trial provided insight into how the forger had manipulated him into participating in the extortion scheme. He described feeling trapped and desperate when he was first approached, going through financial difficulties following his divorce and struggling to maintain his lifestyle. The forger had presented the scheme as a low-risk way to solve his immediate money problems, while also getting back at me for what he perceived as unfair treatment during our business partnership dissolution. The emotional manipulation tactics used by the forger were particularly insidious because they exploited genuine grievances and resentments that my ex-partner had been harboring. The forger had convinced him that I had somehow cheated him out of money during our partnership, and that the extortion scheme was really just a way of getting what he deserved. This twisted logic had made it easier for my ex-partner to rationalize his participation in the criminal activity. The investigation also revealed that the forger had been using social engineering techniques to gather information about potential victims from their friends, family members, and business associates. He would pose as a legitimate researcher or consultant conducting surveys about business practices or financial management, using these conversations to identify people who might be vulnerable to his schemes. The sophistication of his information-gathering methods was truly remarkable and showed a level of criminal expertise that was both impressive and terrifying. The financial analysis conducted by the FBI showed that the forger had generated over $800,000 in illegal profits from his various schemes over the course of several years. He had been living an extravagant lifestyle while maintaining the appearance of being a legitimate consultant, using his ill-gotten gains to fund expensive vacations, luxury cars, and high-end electronics. The contrast between his public persona and his criminal activities was stark and demonstrated the lengths to which white-collar criminals will go to maintain their cover. The restitution process following the conviction was complex and lengthy, involving multiple victims and various types of financial losses. Some victims had paid money directly to the forger or his accomplices, while others had incurred legal fees and accounting costs while defending themselves against false allegations. The court had to determine appropriate compensation for each type of loss, while also considering the defendant's ability to pay restitution from their available assets. The impact of the case on my ex-partner's family was particularly tragic and served as a stark reminder of how criminal behavior affects not just the perpetrators, but also their loved ones. His children had to deal with the shame and embarrassment of having their father arrested and imprisoned, while his ex-wife faced additional financial difficulties as a result of his criminal conviction. The ripple effects of his poor choices extended far beyond his own life and affected people who had no involvement in his criminal activities. The media attention surrounding the case was both helpful and problematic, bringing awareness to the issue of document forgery and financial extortion while also creating additional stress for the victims involved. Several news outlets covered the story, focusing on the sophisticated methods used by the forger and the extensive network of victims he had targeted. While this coverage helped educate the public about these types of crimes, it also meant that my personal situation became a matter of public record and discussion. The educational value of the case extended beyond just the immediate victims and their families to include law enforcement agencies and legal professionals who were dealing with similar crimes. The FBI used the case as a training example for other agents, demonstrating the techniques used by sophisticated white-collar criminals and the importance of thorough forensic analysis in document fraud cases. The lessons learned from this investigation helped improve law enforcement's ability to detect and prosecute similar crimes in the future. The technology aspects of the case were particularly interesting and highlighted the evolving nature of document fraud in the digital age. The forger had been using advanced software and equipment that was readily available to consumers, demonstrating how easy it had become for criminals to create convincing fake documents. This revelation had implications for businesses and government agencies that relied on document authentication as part of their security procedures. The international connections discovered during the investigation were also noteworthy, as the forger had been communicating with criminals in other countries who were involved in similar schemes. The FBI had to coordinate with law enforcement agencies in several different nations to fully understand the scope of the criminal enterprise and identify all the people involved. This international cooperation was essential to building a comprehensive case against the forger and his network of accomplices. The long-term effects of the case on my personal and professional life were significant and continue to influence my decisions and relationships today. The experience made me more cautious about entering into business partnerships and more diligent about verifying information before making important decisions. I've also become more selective about the people I trust with sensitive information about my financial affairs and business activities. The case also had a positive impact on my relationship with law enforcement and the legal system, giving me a better understanding of how these institutions work and the challenges they face in combating sophisticated criminal enterprises. The professionalism and dedication of the FBI agents and prosecutors who worked on the case impressed me and reinforced my confidence in the justice system's ability to protect victims and hold criminals accountable for their actions. In conclusion, what began as a terrifying attempt at extortion evolved into a complex federal investigation that exposed a sophisticated criminal enterprise and helped bring justice to dozens of victims. The experience was difficult and stressful, but it taught me valuable lessons about standing up to criminal behavior, the importance of working with law enforcement, and the need to remain vigilant against increasingly sophisticated fraud schemes. The resolution of the case not only protected me from financial harm, but also helped prevent many other people from becoming victims of similar crimes in the future.